Without further ado, we'll get rocking and rolling here. 8:42 is the time. You're on the River City Station, WMOA, and we're joined, as mentioned, by Ralph Allen. And just good morning, sir. It's a pleasure to have you.
Good morning. It's a real pleasure. WMOA is tattooed on my very soul. Worked here twice. Both times had more fun than anybody ought to have.
And I've heard, through the grapevine that you're just a big personality, and everybody that's around you, you have that infectious energy. So take us back to, maybe the early days pre-WMOA, but how does Ralph Allen get into a broadcasting career? What got you on the first step?
Well, I grew up in Beckley, West Virginia, which is a coal mining town. It's kind of in the middle of the state, in the middle of the coal fields of southern West Virginia. And I was singing in church. Really had planned to be a singer.
Wow.
Took voice lessons. Evelyn Sherritt of the Sherritts was one of my voice teachers. Later, I wound up in Nashville on Music Row.
Okay.
I was in the 10th grade, I believe, and I was on their first album. Second bass, and had a wonderful time with a singing career. And then I discovered radio. I had a friend named Jack Bailey, and Jack said, you should be on the radio. And I said, is there any money in it? And he says, well, there may be if you're any good at it.
Right. And if then, not a lot.
So I think I started at $1.25 an hour was my initial thing there. But I became almost a full-time jockey on the local rock station. Now, I wanted to work for the church station, but they wouldn't hire me. But the rock and roller across town said, sure, okay. You've got the license. At that time, you had to have a real third-class license, had to pass the test, and it was a pretty intense test. So 10th grade, I had a nighttime show on the local rock and roll station. I used a different name. Tall Paul was my name on the air, so nobody knew who I was, really. Didn't really want the church people to find out that I was playing that devil music. But
a little bit of anonymity in case they come for you.
Yeah, and little by little they started to find out. But it was great. So I learned my craft there at WWNR in Beckley, and then I got a job in Charleston when I went to college at Morris Harvey, now University of Charleston. They gave me a job at WCAW, had a full-time job there. So for the next 3 years, I was playing music and going to school, and then got a job at WXIT. That was my first full-time job in radio, with a salary commensurate to what the job requires.
Right.
And so I was pretty happy about that. And then it just fell into a skill set that I was fairly experienced at and could do. And so it worked out really nice if you were pursuing other pursuits like university. And so,
of course,
then later we, went back to graduate school and pursued psychology, clinical psychology, school psychology. I worked in Ohio as a school psychologist for 1 year, and then decided to get back into radio. But I had owned this voiceover company since 1978, and that was still bubbling under. I was still doing that. And then I talked to Johnny, and he said, Ralph, I've been looking for a morning guy for a little more than a year here, because Dan Castelli wanted to go to, I believe it was Cleveland, where his wife had a job.
That sounds right.
So he wanted to go back home. And they eased me right back into the morning show here, and so it worked out kind of nice. But previous to that, my first ride at WMOA, you remember Soft Sounds Along the River? Big John Wharf liked that beautiful music, and Patty Page and Old Cape Cod, and it was great. It was a great time. Good experience. Gave me experience in another format.
Of course.
And so, but Big John Wharf, bigger than life character, just loved the man. And he would sometimes not spare your feelings. And
similar to, I guess, Chris Wharf now.
I tell the story. One time, Big John was just chewing on me. I'd done something wrong, or I'd offended a client, or I'd done something wrong. He was letting me have it, and I walked out. And if you remember Big John, just a big bear of a man. I walked over to him and I hugged him and I said, "I love you, man." And I thought he was going to have a heart attack right there. It was so funny. If you'd have seen the look on his face.
Got to keep them on their toes.
He says, "Get away from me. Get away." But Big John liked me, and I just adored him. He was just a wonderful guy.
And we love hearing those stories. And over the years, we've heard different perspectives. In the early 70s, recently with Bill White just talking about him being an owner of the station, and then even later, people that had saw him on the owner side of things. I believe you were on the latter part of that. Just talk about the various, just maybe untold stories of just how he operated and just how different radio was in that era.
It was a fun thing, Big John gave me a lot of freedom to do, and Johnny did too. They're easy people to work for, and the broadcasting's in their blood. The whole family has so much talent. I mean, they just know how to operate a radio station.
They do.
And this particular one, WMOA, is kind of an outlier. It's an AM station, but it bills like crazy because it has live jockeys, up to date news,
right?
Has real reporting. The play-by-play action is unbelievably good, network quality, and it's just a really well-run, very listenable radio station. And the people of Marietta just love their radio station, and they love the people that work here. You're a beloved person. If you're walking down the street of Marietta and they find out who you are, they say, "Oh yeah, I listen to you on the radio."
Right.
One great one was Ben Gombeski. I don't know if you know Ben.
I do not.
Ben was a local guy. He's passed on now. I was downtown shopping, and he began to question. Just he and me in the store, and I was looking at this slag glass lamp, and he and I began a short conversation. And we said, "Who where do you work?" And wanted to know something about me. And I said, "I work at WMOA." He says, "You do?" His eyes lit up. And he says, "You do? Do you know Big John Wharf?" And I said, "Yeah, I know Johnny, I know the whole crew." He says, "What do you do up there?" And I said, "Well, I do the morning show." He says, "You're Ralph." I said, "Yes, I am."
It's always the best experience.
Isn't it? And it was like, he was like starstruck. It was like, and became an incredible friend. And he would call me in the morning and he'd say, "Ralph, can you play Benny and the Jets?" And I play this song. He and his lovely wife out there every morning. He would call, and he'd tell us that we're just part of his morning, and that is I think was one of the big slices of pleasure that you begin to realize you are part of people's lives. They do depend on you for the news and the weather, and you become part of their routine. And when I left, he tracked me down. He called me at home and he says, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, oh yeah, I'm great."
All right.
And he was concerned about me being okay. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. That in the Marietta market, Marietta Parkersburg, here's a family that you affected in some way that made them smile in the morning.
Right.
Isn't that great? Isn't that a great feeling?
It is special. And not to go too far away, I wanted to talk about, some of that recognition and the different era being just the names, even with you yourself, not to put you on the spot, but I did a little digging, and Ralph Allenbaugh is your name in the radio
that's my
names.
name, yeah.
And then others that I've seen is Uncle Duggar and some various
that's not
people.
his real name.
Yeah, right. And, so kind of talk about that. So we're just a different era. It almost seemed, not to, take away from myself, but it was more skilled of a craft. And like you said, it seemed to be just a more, readily available business for just that star talent. So talk a bit more about that in the name side of things.
I worked for a guy named Paul Miles. Paul is a member of the West Virginia Broadcasting Hall of Fame. He was the guy that kind of built Capital Broadcasting. Tough guy to work for. Did not tolerate operational mistakes. You'd get called in if you made one. But Paul was a brilliant broadcaster, and he understood clearly that radio is a small segment of show business.
Right.
And he played to that. So we all had Mustangs, new Mustangs that they traded out.
Wow.
Had your name on the side, who you were, and he did everything he could to make you a local star. And you would show up for a remote broadcast, and there may be 2,000 people show up.
Right.
And it was the most amazing thing to me that to you it's a job, to you it's getting you through college.
Right.
but you're the nearest thing to maybe a film star that some people are ever going to meet.
Right.
And you need to be kind of aware of that. And that always kind of, I found kind of interesting that you're just a guy or a gal in broadcasting, but it truly does have a show business component to it. And Paul Miles clearly understood that, and he played to it, and he really, in that day and time, late 60s, early 70s, radio was maybe a little more show business like than it is now. But we all wore a tie to work because a client might be coming through the station.
No, of course.
Had blazers with the call letters on them, and you better show up and be in uniform. And if you needed to be somewhere to promote a product or whatever, it was a part of the job. And they usually paid you for that. I worked in Charleston at a couple of big stations, and then got picked up by WVAM in Altoona. That was a big station. And because of a handshake, I came back to Parkersburg to honor a commitment I made to a friend, and took a whopping pay cut to come back to a smaller market. But, that's just one of the stories. I went to work for the late John Potts. John was one of my mentors, and I worked for him a couple of times. And he's a Marietta resident, or was, and recently passed. Big-voiced pro. But I remember going through air checks, recordings of my show with John Potts, and he was just brutal.
Right.
Just brutal. Like, couldn't you do that any better? Or what'd you do that for?
Right.
And after a while, you begin to understand the whys, why you do what you do, or what it should sound like. And then I became almost a born-again air checker. I recorded everything, and then a week later, I'd do critical review. Was it good enough? And I never really worried too much about management or program directors, but was it right for my listener?
Of course.
Those are the folks that really will increase your paycheck and they have and you're doing well when they call and they critique you, or they'll say, "I didn't like that song you played." You say, "Oh, well, what did you like about it, or what did you not like?" So you can do some active research and find out, okay, where is the market here? What do these people want to hear?
And you never know how many people are listening until you do something bad. Then you're like, okay, now I know how many people are tuning in.
When I'd see 7 phone lines light, I'd say, uh-oh, I did something wrong.
Right.
But for the most part, very positive, just a wonderful career. And boy, I was on the air for roughly 50 years. I still do voiceover work, but the stations and the people you worked with become family.
Right. And not to cut in, that was going to go into my next question. Talk about and set the scene of the staff that, became family in your first or second stint here at the station.
Well, there was Dick Geyer, bigger than life guy, big voice, kind of intimidating, big guy.
Right.
And I looked at him the first day and I thought, what am I doing here? Because if you walk down the hallway at WMOA, you see the pictures of some legendary broadcasters that worked here. And there used to be, in the old days, the hallway was lined with awards from Associated Press and United Press International, all of the awards that the news department had won. And every morning I'd walk down that hallway, and it always impressed upon me that you're part of the long line of absolute pros that worked here, and you owe it your best shot every day, every second. I never forgot that, and I always felt a little bit in awe of this radio station. And this is the one that I have most loved, and the one that I am careful to put top on my resume. That I worked here with all of these pros that worked here and then launched bigger careers. Some of them work for ESPN. Goodness gracious, people are the people that this station has spinned off to bigger careers. It's just amazing. It's like a who's who of broadcasting.
And it says a lot about, just the talent that's here. And as you mentioned, just the Wharfs being able to see talent and kind of gather it. And for the people that are just tuning in, we're joined by Ralph Allen here in the WMOA studios. And before we get to the top, just more aspects and maybe an untold story of either Big John or Mr. Geyer, or even of yourself and that interaction in the community. What's a story that comes to mind when you think of WMOA and you say, that represents my time at the station so well?
Well, I have a collection of of coffee cups that have WMOA on them through the various times.
I have that. I have a similar collection.
It sits in my bookcase, and I walk by it in the mornings on the way to my studio. I have a studio in my home, and I look at it, and I ask myself, is the work you're going to do today worthy of these guys that you worked with? You know, and you know, the other day I called one of your jockeys, and I said, you know, I heard that break you did, and there's great hope for you, and that's Kyle. And he started to laugh. And I said, you just might make it.
All right.
And he says,
27 years in.
And he says, don't mess with me, Ralph.
Yeah.
But, you know, I wanted him to know that, yeah, you know, you never know who's listening out there. And
you don't.
And I'm sitting in the Kroger parking lot enjoying WMOA. And I just dialed him up on the phone and said, you know, yeah, you're doing a great job.
And he is amazing. And that's one of the great aspects that I like to hear about, because to me, Kyle Wenzel is the pro and the savvy veteran. But to a lot of the stories that we hear, he was the young guy that, you know, was kind of getting picked on. Well-deserved, I'm sure. But talk about that, the growth that you've seen from Kyle, or maybe other people that Johnny, you said, okay, you know, he's in the beginning stages. I can see it, but he hasn't done it. And now we're on the other side of things.
Yeah, I remember Johnny when he was just starting, and it was, goodness gracious, I thought, you know, he's going to have to step up. And boy, did he step up.
Right.
One of the great play-by-play guys. And what a talent. No sports. And Chris, goodness gracious, if I can find Chris calling a ball game anytime, I'll dial it up and hang with him.
Me and you both.
Takes you right to the ballpark. You know, just an incredible staff. Wonderful people. But they also give you a lot of freedom, a lot of chances to try things and learn.
Right.
And they'll let you make a mistake here and there. You know, you can't make a daily diet of it, but if you try something, you make a mistake, and they'll say, okay, you know, tomorrow's another day, and let's try to do that better. But very supportive, wonderful people. The whole Wharf family, you know, they're just top drawer people. I just love them all.
I couldn't agree more. And here in the last minute or so, sir, just looking back, WV Broadcasting Hall of Famer, I believe Mr. DJ USA Hall of Famer as well. Long list of accolades, a lot of stations that you've been at. Maybe to an up-and-coming broadcaster, just a passive listener. What would you say, just looking back on your career? Would you do anything different? And what do you see for the years to come with your career?
Well, I think there'll always be room for talented people. And if you study it, if you study what makes radio great, what entertains me,
right?
What would I like to hear? You know, and the other night I listened to a kid on the radio from I think the station was in South Dakota. He's cooking away. He was making a few operational mistakes, but he was entertaining me hour after hour. And I thought, you know, radio is not dead. It is show business. It is a beautiful, beautiful industry. And doing it live and in the moment is absolutely the best.
I couldn't agree more, sir.
And I owe a debt I can never repay. That's the way I feel about it.
And a lot of people feel the same way. As you mentioned, coffee mugs, and your mug was even on billboards.
That's right.
Being in just being in the morning show seat, it's just like you said, big shoes to fill, especially with having you in studio. So I really appreciate it again, sir, and I just wish you the best.
Thank you so much.
Just really look forward to speaking with you again.
Great. Have a beautiful career.
All right, you too, sir, and already have and will for years to come. That is Ralph Allen. You can find him on ralphallen.net, Ralph Allen Media, to stay up to date with all of the things that he's doing. WMOA alum, celebrating 75 years in the River City. You're on WMOA